Hello! So I've been thinking lately about starting at last a series of tutorial style videos. It's something I wanted to be doing for a long time, and I finally put it out there to some of my followers on Instagram, and they've been giving me suggestions, which I'll be starting with on this video. So this will hopefully become a little series on the side of my main videos. And the topic for this video is going to be colour. Now, colour isn't necessarily the first thing that someone might think of when you want to learn about drawing or how someone draws. But it's almost always something that comes into mind when you make art anyway. And it doesn't matter how well you can draw something, if you don't colour it well, then that could throw off the whole artwork. So colour is an important element to learn about. And I could go into all the theoretical stuff about colour, but I'm gonna focus more on the practical side of things, how I actually use colour for my work. And hopefully that will teach you a few things to improve upon. And if you want something that's more colour theory focused, then I can see about making a video based on that. In the meantime, there are other videos probably better at explaining colour theory than what I can. I'm still learning a fair bit of it myself, but I think I've got enough under my belt that I can actually teach you something about colour today. So I'm gonna do some sketches in this book while I'm talking to you, and without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to start here by making this grid. I'm going to do about 9 squares, make them about 2 centimeters each, and this will be used to help teach one of the points that I want to make to start with. This is a rule that I stick pretty close to with every artwork that I make, and that is that you should limit yourself to 5 colours. Now you're probably wondering why 5. This is probably the closest to colour theory that I'm going to be getting with you in this video, but when you look at like landscapes, nature, you don't tend to see this massive combination of colours. It's a rare thing really. You can get rainbows, that's the only example off the top of my head where it's natural to see so many colours at one time. This even goes for character design or any form of concept art really. You don't see that much colour. And to start with, I'm gonna fill in this grid, but I'm limiting myself to 5 colours, and I've got to make a different colour for all 9 squares. So I'm going to start with this sky blue. Just fill that in. So I'm going to use red on this square. I'm going to do yellow here. Next I'll pick magenta. And is this the right one? I'm going to use green for this one. So that's my 5 colours. I now have to create new colours for these 4 squares, but I'm not allowed to use any more colours. So I'm gonna grab the blue again. Just gonna put that in here. And I'm gonna bring the red back. And obviously, if you're familiar with colour mixing, you know exactly where this is going. We now have purple. It doesn't match any of the previously shown colours. It's a new colour, but it's been made out of these 2 colours. So it doesn't break the 5 colour rule. But this is how it works. You can limit yourself to 5 different colours, and I don't think this counts white and black because they're tones, which means you still have tone that you can play around with. You have a variety of combinations that you can make. There's the orange. I come here and mix red and green. Yeah, using just those 5 colours as a starting point, or whatever 5 colours you select, because it doesn't have to be these 5, it's probably not going to be these 5. You can actually make more than enough colour for your illustration without it looking like it's trying too hard to be colourful. I think this is an important something to learn. So there you have 9 different colours that have been made from the 5 that we started with. So I'm going to move on to my next point now. Right, so I'm going to close this book for a moment and bring out my old sketchbook. It's no secret that I draw a lot of characters. I'm a character artist. So it makes sense for me to talk about working on my characters, which is what people are probably going to want to know. So I do have a method I try to stick to when giving my characters colour schemes, and it coincides with the 5 colour rule. I do try to limit the palette. But another thing that I try to do is I give each character, there might be a proper term for this. I think it's focus colour. And if not, then I'll coin that term. But you'll notice that each character has one colour that sticks as a prominent colour in their scheme. So Say with Droey, blue is the very prominent colour. He has recently added red to his scheme. That's something I did when I redesigned him just over a year ago. Anne has a lot of purple. Ida, her main colour's orange. Lexi, yellow. So it's normally that the character, and it's usually their costume element as well, that dons their main colour, and then everything else is coloured around that. With a character like Chrissy, it was different. Her hair was the main colour, whilst everything else was then coloured around that. That was because she was meant to be like a personification of the Christmas season. So her hair was kind of designed after like Christmas trees, and that was like the really focal point of her design. Sometimes that's how I design characters, especially if they're themed around something particular. But normally it is to just give this character a main colour, and then whatever colours I used elsewhere will vary to complement with that. So with Anne, again, the only colour that seems to really contrast her colour scheme is the gold. Everything else is this sort of pinky purplish colour. Her skin, it has a slightly pink tint to it. Her hair, it's technically magenta. I think it's a bit lighter here than it should be. And then she's got a two-toned purple for her outfit. For Ida, she's mostly got these warm colours. She's got a bit of gold, a bit of red. Blue would be her accent colour. And with Agrius, he's got a lot of them dark, slightly browned colours. They were all taken, with Agrius's colour scheme, they were all taken from like actual moths. And I think it was specifically the type of hawk moth that he is based on. So again, you can take from images to create colour schemes, and there is a more elaborate case of that with John. I'm gonna show you the original drawing of John that I did. So this is gonna be a proper throwback. We're talking early 2017, so like early days of Droey. And is that in camera? No, it's not well enough anymore. There you go. That is the original drawing of John. But you can see here I was doing a bit of swatching. This was the finished result. With John, I actually tested myself to create a character inspired by a piece of food, and the piece of food that I chose was pizza. So that really influenced his design and his character. What I did was I actually took an image. This is traditional, so the colours don't exactly match, but when I was working on computer, I would actually colour pick colours from the images. So if you like, you can do this on MS Paint, Photoshop, probably every art tool. You can just click on a colour and you can then draw with that exact colour when you want to recreate it. And I used that to create John's colour scheme, and all swatched from a slice of pizza that I found on Google. That's not the only case where I've done something like this as well. There is an artwork in this book, which I'll turn back to. Here I've actually extended that theory and put it on a whole illustration rather than just the character. So everyone's colours are slightly off here, but they're still pretty close to their usual colour schemes. without spoiling the quality of the illustration. Everything is unified by these colours. But here it is. This exists as an example of how you can still colour an illustration, probably with quite a few colours actually, that are all from real life, sourced from a picture that someone's taken, and it can actually give you this pleasantly coloured illustration. So I'm going to turn to my more recent examples of artwork to now talk about how I colour illustrations in general. This isn't focused on the characters, but sometimes they do come into play with that. So you get a bit of a look through some of my sketchbook. I'm going to find you some examples. So taking a look here, and this one of Anne in this really gothic getup. All I really used here, I think there was a bit of brown in the trees, a lot of grey, black, a bit of purple on the bushes and the ground. And those colours, they're close enough to the colours on the character design, but they're all desaturated and unified, which really gives Anne that contrast. It allows her to stick out. You're drawn to her rather than the background. So what I did for that one, I think every element in there featured some amount of grey. So there's this one unifying colour. I do this with watercolour every time. I'll wash the background, only the background elements, with this one colour that I really want to be sort of the kind of hue that everything draws towards. And then I'll colour in on top of that, either with more watercolour or pencils. And it doesn't matter what colour you're going to make things, they'll all have a bit of that one wash underneath them that really unifies the illustration. This one here, everything is coloured the colour that you think the object is. Like you see a tree, the leaves are green, so colour it in green. You see a building, it's got red bricks on, so you colour it red, etc. So I've coloured everything in its true colours, but then I've gone over and shaded it in with red. And I think I've added blue highlights as well onto everything. You can see that on the grass especially. I don't know if it shows up on the camera that well, but you can definitely see the red shading on it, especially with the tree, the hair. So even the characters had that treatment. I think it was inspired by the Nintendo Switch, which is what he's holding there. So you've got your dark tones being in red, your light tones being in blue, which complements the Switch that they're playing on, and it unifies the colour palette. Now I'm going to show you one more example, and I'm choosing this illustration here, where I've got these two characters having an arm wrestle, and everything in the background is a shade of green except the pencil. I blipped there. I can't remember why I coloured that in with yellows instead. But apart from that, everything else is a shade of green, which I think you can sometimes see this in graphic novels when you really want your characters to stand out. So if you're after contrast, just pick a colour. It can be any colour, it doesn't have to make sense, just as long as it complements the colour scheme of the character. And if the character is a singular colour, it should be a complementary colour, or a real drastically changed version of whatever colour the character is. So it could be less saturated, it could be darker, and you really get that contrast then. It's like, these books, they wouldn't all be green. You wouldn't have this dark green furniture. I mean, you probably can get stuff like that. But not all of these elements, especially not the skirting board, that wouldn't be green. But they all are green for this illustration, so that the two people having their arm wrestle really stand out. Right, so I don't want to be showing any more of what's in my sketchbooks. This isn't a sketchbook tour after all. I'm gonna come back to this, and now I'm gonna just draw a ball. Right, I'm gonna pick a colour. I'm gonna use green. I'm actually going to stop here, because I want to show you for the rest of that ball a good tip for, this applies to colour in pencil specifically, how I use them to colour in normally. So I'll actually go in these circular motions, and I'm not pressing as hard. You don't want to put so much force when you're actually turning the pencil around in a different direction. You can probably actually see, I don't know if it shows up that well, but this bit is now actually more green than this bit here. So it's got a bit more saturation, it's slightly darker. And if I was to stop somewhere in the middle of here, if I'd been doing this method, then there'd be streaks. You're less likely to get streaks if you go in these circular motions, or if it's an oval motion. So let's just fill the rest of that in. Keep it nice and even. And for this tip, it's going to be to never use black for shading. Unless the colour of something that you are shading is black, you shouldn't use that colour. It doesn't just make things darker, it actually desaturates the object that you're looking at. And if you look at things in real life, they don't have a tint of black on them when you see them getting darker. So if I can find something to show you an example with. Right, so you can probably see how there's a lighter purple on the right side, whereas on the left, even though it's very dark, it's actually just this really dark purple. There's probably a bit of blue in there. This probably isn't the best example I can show you, but that's what I've got handy at the moment. So the trick with shading props or characters is that you just want to get a darker version of whatever colour you're using, or like you've seen in some of my illustrations just now, you can use a different colour entirely. That helps with something like atmospheric shading. And there you go, there's a nice ball. It looks three-dimensional. I've used only 2 colours for that, and it still looks like a green ball. I'm going to actually go over a bit of it with black. And already you can see that that doesn't look natural. So yeah, when you're shading stuff, just get a darker colour, don't get black. So I'm going to backtrack to character design for a moment to talk about how you can work with monochromatic colour schemes. And for this case, I'm going to show you this character. You may remember her from a few videos back. This is the character that I designed using only the colour blue. I have a few characters like this. You saw the red and yellow ones in my example earlier. I've also done white, I think green. Yeah, it's all the same colour, just different tones. So it's making sure that one element has a different tone enough to stand out from the next. And so with using only the one colour, I've made this nice colour scheme for the character. And there is one last tip I can give you, but this applies to digital art. I don't think you can do this with traditional. It's possible maybe if you do it on swatch sheets, if you like make a tiny little thumbnail and colour that in. But this applies specifically to Photoshop or any other art programs where you do a colour scheme, and what I usually do is I have a different colour on a different layer. So this and that, they'd all be on one layer. The hair would all be on a separate layer. And when I think I've done with the colours, this is something I do for my character design as well. I open up a hue and saturation layer. I take away the saturation completely, and that can show you, it will show you the whole image but in grayscale, so you'll see how well elements are standing out from each other. And that's one of the ways I decide whether I'm happy with a colour scheme or not. If there's colours that are blending in with the next element too closely, then I will change the colour. It's not something I can so easily apply to traditional artwork, but I suppose if you were working on paper, like I say, you can do a little thumbnail, take a picture on your phone or your iPad, and tone down the saturation on that. I think you can do that. I know you can on an iPad, so I'm gonna guess with a phone camera you can do the same. And then once you're happy with what you've got in your little thumbnail, you can just do it on your actual illustration. And on that note, I think that's everything that I can offer you today for how I use colour. I hope you found this video helpful, or will find it helpful. Maybe there's something you've yet to apply that you'd like to. And if you want to see more videos like this, where I just give art advice or teach you how to draw some certain way, then let me know what you want me to try, and I will put it on a list of suggestions and get around to it when I can. I know I've got a few suggestions on my list already that I'm gonna be looking into doing. And with that, I bid you a good day, keep being creative, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye!